Okay, everybody, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our afternoon sessions, and we're going to start the afternoon with a chat from Jon Cole from the British Entomological and Natural History Society, who's going to tell us about the BENHS 150th anniversary Bioblitz at Dinton Pastures earlier this year. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon. We are in afternoon now, I think, aren't we?
Yeah.
I don't know how many people are familiar with British Entomological and Natural History Society. From now on, I should refer to it as BENHS. But we're based in Dinton Pastures. And I'll just start off with a very brief history. Is that showing okay? It was actually founded in 1872 as the South London Entomological Society. And I think I'm told that only the Royal Entomological Society is older, 189 years in to compete with it. It morphed into BENHS in 1968. I'm not sure the reason why they changed, but obviously they wanted to go more British than just London focused. And in 1992, thanks to a huge rise in rents in the centre of London, they moved from the Alpine Club to Dinton Pastures, which is fortunately just down the road from where I live. And we've got nice facilities there. You've got a microscope room, library with all the current journals, and a meeting room. If anybody wants to come and pay us a visit, just let us know. Okay, so 150 years. It is several lifetimes. We decided what were we going to do to celebrate 150 years. So obviously, being based at Dinton Pastures, something like a community Bioblitz seemed like a pretty good idea. And two of us were chatting in the pub and we came up with the idea over a couple of pints. So anyway, that took place in June, from the 17th to the 19th. And it was organised by myself and a chap called Steve Lings, who's our one of our events managing guys, and with some real help from Woking Borough Council Countryside Service. I don't think there's anyone here from WBC today, which is a shame. So the programme we initiated on the Friday was all-night moth trapping by the Berkshire Moth Group and BENHS folk. We couldn't really get general public in there. We wanted to, but there's too much risk assessment and stuff involved, health and safety and all the rest of it. And we ran 8 lights. That's Ian Sims, myself, a chap called Norman Hall and Paul Black, well known in Berkshire for their mothing abilities, except me, perhaps. On Sunday, we opened the park up and the public were asked to go out and record what they saw. And that also included on that day Saturday, I say Sunday, didn't I? On the Saturday, included the Amateur Entomological Society Bug Club, which is for kids, annual family day, which they hold at Dinton every year. And also Saturday night, it was an all-night moth trapping as well. Just 3 lights. Paul Black was the only chap who stayed up all night. He stayed up all night, 2 nights running. I chickened out about midnight, went out to my bed as I knew I was on duty the next day. And again on Sunday, we basically did exactly the same thing and let people go out to record stuff. Now, it's obviously a bit more complicated than that, but the focus was on families, especially their kids. So if you don't know Dinton Pastures, that's the schematic that the Countryside Service allowed me to use. And you see in the bottom right-hand corner is where the BENHS headquarters building is, next to the Countryside Park workshops. And but we held most of the event up at the activity centre on the top right there, on the north end of the site. I was going to look up the area of the site in hectares and acres before I came, and I just forgot. But it's quite large, and all the lakes area are results from gravel. I think, am I right, was dug up for the M4.
Yeah,
way back.
Salford, Sanford Lane, M4, north of Sanford Lane, the A329.
There you go. You see, mine of information is. So we just basically sent people out and said, come back and do what, tell us what you see. However, well, I'll come to the however in a minute. But thanks to the Woking Borough Council Countryside Service, they hired us to let us hire the room for free. Well, it wasn't for free because they had to pay for it themselves. And this is the activity centre at Dinton Pastures. The rock climbing or whatever it's called, it was not mandatory. There was nothing up there in the canopy. But we had several groups as exhibitors. We had our friends here from TVERC over in the top right there, Henrietta and the chap who was here this morning, whose name I forget. Then we had the Friends of Ruscombe Wood in the top left there, sitting at a table with no one there, seemingly, unfortunately, talking at the time. There's Ben's desk here and butterfly conservation over in the corner. Graham should be standing there, but he's not for some reason. He's gone for a pint. And of course, Reading and District Natural History Society, which I think is generally known as Reading Nats, which is a bit unfortunate. So what do we do? Nighttime stuff, moth trapping. And I don't know how many people had moth traps? So you all know what you're doing then. But there's three different sorts here. I don't know if people know Norman Hall, but he spends most of his time groveling around on the ground for micro moths. And all black here with his very over-engineered pole light. And my ex-colleague of mine, Ian Sims, at a conventional Robinson trap. And as you can see, the COVID mask is proving very useful, actually. Normally you get these things up your every possible facial orifice, if any of you've done this sort of stuff. But most of the things you see flying around there are caddisflies or midges of various sorts. Then during the day, first thing we did was open the moth trap for the families in the morning to look through them. But a young lady there fished out that immense signal crayfish from the M Brook. I don't think I've ever seen one that big. Quite some size. A few of those on the barbie should be quite nice. Sweet netting. The little girl there name is Victoria. She's the daughter of Chris Raper's partner. Most of you know Chris. So a lot of people doing stuff. But as I've only got a few minutes, I'll go through the summary. Now, Bioblitzes very often turn up just a few species. And great fun, and you get interest from the people concerned. But I don't know, you might only get 30 or 40 species if you're lucky. In this case, we were lucky enough to have 6 or 7 experts and specialists in various groups of arthropods. So everything that was brought to us was verified either on the night or later after people had taken things home and identified them microscopically. So we started off lichens, plants, obviously. 10% of the records were plants, hardly surprising, but not that many species really, because it's mainly Graham and I, wasn't it? Identified the plants. So I don't have to read out the whole lot, but you go down to spiders, we had a good representation. True bugs, we had a good representation. But it's only when you get over here that you notice that moths formed 199 of the species we found. Of the total 572 species we recorded over the 2.5-day period. 919 records in total, which was quite some going. It took me a long time to concatenate everything into various spreadsheets. But what you see with the moths is not surprising, because I mean, you have a number of lights out and the moths just simply come to you quite happily. As those who run moth traps will well know. You don't have to go there, you can just sit there and wait for them to turn up. And I think Graham mentioned that get 80 or so species in the night easily. The first night, it was beautiful weather. It was warm, humid, and absolutely tremendous for mothing. The second night, it rained, but we should have had 4 traps, one plugged into the mains of the building, and we managed to fuse both building. Water got into the light, and that was the end of that. Whereas Paul had a generator, so he was able to run 2 lights off that, and I had another trap down the other end of the site. So all in all, I think that's pretty successful. Just some highlights. Beautiful shed skin of a grass snake. Now you'll note I've called this the barred grass snake and not also Natrix natrix, which is popularly known as, but the names have changed now. It's now the barred grass snake and Natrix helvetica, subspecies helvetica. I'm not a reptile, I'm not a reptilian person, but I gather it's to do with various subspecies being found on the European continent, and the taxonomists have been changing names. So it should be known as the barred grass snake, apparently. And then we had exhibits of moths that we collected from the previous nights, popped into cages, and that was very successful. A few photographs of things we caught. The square spot is quite a nice species to find. The small elephant hawk moth, which I think is rather a splendid critter, and of course the scarlet tiger moth. All fairly local, but they do turn up in reasonable numbers on occasion. Dinton Pastures, we see small elephant hawk moth all the time. And just a few others I put in. The larva of the grey dagger moth was brought in. That's important because the grey dagger and the dark dagger, you can't identify, you can't separate them without either dissecting them and looking at the genitalia, except from the larva. The caterpillars are quite different. So that's one way of, if you can find the larva, then all the better. So we've got a distinct record there. The blue bordered carpet, I just like it. It's particularly common. Some of these I just happen to have photographs of, so I can photograph everything we caught. And that's a nymph of the speckled bush cricket, which is all a rather splendid thing, I think, anyway. And two-spot ladybird, but this is the form, the six-spotted sexpustulata form. So instead of two black spots on a red background, it's six red spots on a black background, but the same size, they're very small. And as you know, the two-spot ladybird has been in decline significantly in our area, although I did see a few this year, I have to say. So a few other rarities that I didn't have photographs of, the Great Oak Beauty, which Martin Harvey, the moth recorder for Berkshire, was really happy to see. Border straw, which is a migrant, and two really nice flies. Now, I'm not a dipterist by any means, but these were caught by Andrew Halstead and verified by Peter Chandler, who are both dipteran gurus. They're tiny little things. Chrysopilus letus is a saproxylic, in other words, larvae living in dead wood. So that was a really nice thing. There may be other rarities in that list, but I haven't really been able to go through the whole lot just yet. But all the records we got were checked by specialists. And it has to be said, the reason we've got so many species is because we had 6 or 7 specialists who were able to do a lot of the sampling themselves and the verifications thereof. So in truth, although we had 1,300 people come through the door of the activity building, very, very few actually brought in any specimens or photographs of things, which was a shame, but that's the nature of these things, I fear. So we were lucky because we're BENHS and we've got experts on call, we were able to use those people to actually do the work. So a very successful weekend, really. 572 species, 919 records. Huge interest in wildlife in general, we noted from people coming into the room. Lots of intelligent and tricky questions, especially by children. It can be really embarrassing sometimes when they ask you stuff and you haven't got a clue what it is. The shed grass snake skin and the living critters, especially moths, were great favorites, particularly with the kids, because we were able to, because the moths are fairly dormant and docile, most of them, during the day to the early morning particularly, we were able to pick out things and put them on her finger. Time's up, she says. And, you know, I had photographs of a hawk moth on my nose and stuff like that, but I wasn't able to find the person who took it. So will we do it again? Hopefully, but probably just a one-day affair. 2 days is really stressful to organise. And I've got to reiterate that the BENHS and AES is extremely grateful to members of the Working Borough Council, Countryside Service for both their financial and staff support, which would be very difficult to run without them. Okay.